Alright, so I recently finished up playing the Simpsons game. The one by EA that I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was released close to the movie. I wasn't really sure what to expect going in terms of quality, just because I've seen so many mixed things, especially coming off of Hit and Run, which is a fantastic game, and this potentially being what we got instead of a sequel to that. I didn't even realize this, but when I was researching it on Wikipedia, Visceral, I guess, is the dev for the home console edition, which is what I played. They are most well known for the Dead Space games. I think Battlefield Hardline was one of their last games. I didn't even realize, too, that they also did some of the My Sims games, which I think would have been released around the same time as well, so I don't know if they were working on multiple projects or whatnot. And some 007 games too, which Nightfire from that era is particularly my favorite. I definitely plan to revisit and complete that, as well as check out some of the other games from that Xbox, PS2, GameCube era. I'm not sure which ones specifically were theirs, because I think there was multiple different studios, because I think they're coming out pretty regularly for a while under EA. So you have a decent studio who have put out some quality games behind this one. This is a new genre for them, though, I believe. Or at least not what they're most well known for, and well, the mixed reception isn't just because of the potential loss of Hit and Run 2 or some of the shitty things EA's done. It definitely comes down to the quality of the game. This is essentially kind of a platformer beat 'em up, and it doesn't do either particularly well. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like it's lacking a certain smoothness and can be kind of janky at times. Actually, I was going for 100% initially, but I eventually, because of just some of that lack of polish, at least I felt like, I sort of gave up one of the achievements for essentially beating a target time for each level, because I felt like I was losing a target time pretty early in the game over some bullshit. The camera isn't the best either, which I know is a common complaint for a 3D platformer-ish game, but I don't know, especially coming from a decent studio with, a big publisher, probably a decade or more newer than Mario 64. I just felt like it was extra noticeable compared to usual circumstances. You do almost wonder, though, if perhaps the game did have a bit of a rush, if they had to have it out within a certain time frame of the movie. The game isn't really at all tied to the movie, but you can certainly see, I remember the movie being pretty big, so I imagine they want to capitalize off of the popularity the series was having at the time. There are lots of collectibles in the game. It does remind me of Donkey Kong 64 a bit, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Well, I like Donkey Kong 64, but one of the weak points a lot of people had with it, which I don't think in that game was particularly as bad as people made it out to be, was how you had I forget how many, I think it was 4 or 5 different playable characters, and they all had their independent collectibles, and this game kind of does the same thing. The place where it's really bad is the hub world, because the levels you normally go in with 2 different characters, and it's only their 2 different collectibles, and they're easily interchangeable. But in the hub world, you can only select 2 characters at a time, yet there's collectibles for all 4 of them around the map, and some of them require 2 specific characters because everyone has their own different abilities. Like, you might have to use Lisa's special move to get a Homer collectible, and then there'll be another Homer collectible where you'll need Marge's special move or something like that, and that gets really annoying. Especially because late in the game, there's levels where you can play as all 4 at once, and I think the reason that you can in the hub world is because of a certain mechanic which we'll dive into later with Marge, which also ties into the NPCs around the world, but I don't know, I wish they found a way around that. Granted, I don't know what the hardware was capable of at the time, but it definitely takes away from a bit from the sort of more open area collecting of the game. And then the regular levels are linear, which is fine, but it's definitely not as fun to collect different collectibles in linear levels, in my opinion. At least you can exit once you get the collectibles you need, and you get to keep them. You don't have to clear the whole level again, unless you, of course, miss something at the very end. I guess I'll talk about the characters themselves. I mentioned that Marge has a specific mechanic, and that is that she can take control of different NPCs, almost like Pikmin. And that's actually pretty cool. It almost makes me want like a Simpsons Pikmin-esque game. I mean, Simpsons has so many characters. Like, I haven't watched newer seasons or episodes that much. I remember seeing a clip, though, where I think it was like some crossover with Rick and Morty. And I think they accidentally kill one or all of the Simpsons or something. And I think they even mentioned, it's like, oh shit, do you know how many characters we have to hide this from? And I think that goes to show in this game, because even exploring the open world and collecting the different characters when you're playing as Marge, I mean, I don't remember like when I sort of stopped. Somewhere between seasons 8 and 12, that I think was the common recommendation of how far to go with the series. So I think I did stop somewhere in there as recommended. But yeah, even I can still recognize, like, I think there was less than a handful of characters that didn't at least seem familiar to me, you know? It's just kind of crazy. Homer can morph into a ball, which I guess has some interesting physics with it, maybe Katamari-esque, but different because you're not growing and growing and growing. And Bartman is exactly how it sounds. And I don't know, that was definitely the least fun. Lisa's wasn't too big either. But Bart's kind of feels like Batman, but this game was what, only a year or two earlier than Arkham? So, especially after playing Arkham, that does that gameplay style so much smoother and better, you know? It's hard to go back to, in a way. The levels in general are fine. There's a couple complaints I have, particularly being that there's a couple levels that borrow decent sections of the overworld, so I guess it depends on how you've explored the open world, on whether that really affects you or not. Like, I didn't specifically explore those sections when I did those levels, but when I went back to get collectibles and it was kind of already familiar, that was kind of disappointing. I would rather be seeing all fresh stuff in either the level or the open world. Some of the levels towards the end of the game, too, I felt like went on a little long. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I was just kind of ready to be done with it. I will say probably my favorite level, though, which was one of the later levels, too, that I feel like they had a good balance on, was Grand Theft Scratchy, a parody of Grand Theft Auto. And they do sort of model some sections off of San Andreas, it almost feels like. So as a fan of that game as well, it is appreciated, which that's another thing too, like the humor, I guess, of this game. If you like fourth wall breaking, this is the game for you. It does a lot of that. Where like something like Simpsons Hit and Run feels like a video game that focuses on the Simpsons world, this game almost feels like the Simpsons world focusing on video games, if that makes any sense. I will say I did appreciate the ending. I won't spoil it, but I guess it's an interesting twist is what I will say. Even some of the references, though, like you see a big EA Sports, I think, billboard in the open world, which isn't surprising. Like I said, they published the game, and seeing how Simpsons can be sometimes, I guess you gotta be a good sport about yourself being parried. But it goes well beyond that. There's references and parodies of stuff by like Valve, Nintendo, Sega. Namco, I already mentioned Rockstar, Bethesda, the consoles at the time, Capcom, and probably some more. Maybe some I didn't even, recognize. And it's good to see them not shy away from that, too. There's some interesting boss choices, too, especially when you start thinking, like, geez, I'm fighting this person after fighting this person. Like, it gets kind of out there. Besides that, there's some time challenges you can do, which are replaying certain areas with certain conditions, or maybe with a completely new condition, and some of them are good. Some of them are pretty tough, though. I did luckily make it through all of them. A couple were pretty challenging, though. I will say something that was a little disappointing for me was, because like I said, I think Marge had my favorite gameplay style in this. But then I think she also had the least amount of levels, and I feel like she only really reached her full potential in one or two of the levels. One of them was Grand Theft Scratchy. Overall, though, for its faults, I will say that this was probably still worth the playthrough. Especially as a fan of just the world, and especially like the classic episodes and such. My only regret with it is trying to go for like 100% with certain things like the collectibles and that. I wouldn't recommend going down that route, even if it seems like it might not be that bad. It's not worth it unless you really like the game or The Simpsons or want those achievements or trophies or whatever.